Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Cory Glenn with Transcend Dental Education, Transcend Digital Lab. And for this week's Facebook Live, I'm going to be covering a lot of stuff about doing FP1 temps. So, if you've ever done full arch implant cases, you probably know that doing an FP1 style restoration where you're actually immediate loading is probably one of the most demanding things because there's just so many aspects that just make it tougher. You've got thinner temps, and so there's much less bulk to it, which means that they're going to be more prone to breaking. And then also, you don't just have one big flat plane of reduction where you're just trying to emerge out of that. Rather, you've got all the individual sockets and you're trying to make it look natural and emerge from the gum tissue as opposed to just having ridge lap ponics on everything. So, those aspects make it a much more difficult type of a case to plan. And so posted some work from earlier in the week showing a few different versions of FP1 temps and seemed to be a lot of interest in that. So I thought I'd go through it and just show you how I'm making these. I've got one of the cases open here, and I start from the point of doing the picture analysis. I'm going to look at their pictures and analyze the midline, the tooth length, all of that kind of stuff to try to do a facial simulation of what the ideal smile would look like. And I've shown that on previous Facebook Lives. And then once I've got that simulation, then I will go into Blue Sky Plan or ExoCAD, doesn't really matter which, and I'll try to make a wax up that mimics that. Okay, so that's basically where I'm at right now. A couple little minor things to note here. I've more or less matched the existing positions of this patient's teeth, but he was fairly constricted, had some apnea. I've actually uh, widened his maxillary arch out a little bit. This is something I picked up from Danny Doming, watching him do a lot of his full arch cases, and he's really made some huge differences for patients in their snoring, sleep apnea, that kind of thing, by just widening the arch a little bit. And so that's the wax up that I've got. And the way we planned this case was that we were going to do serial extractions. And so if I turn on the abutments here, you can see the sites where implants need to go. And I also should mention, I did plan the implants backwards from the ideal prosthetic positions. You can see here where I'm emerging with all of those in the new bridge that this patient will get. And so if we turn these temps off, there we go. You can now see where the teeth are that need to come out. And my favorite way to do these is to just leave what teeth I can to support the surgical guide, because a tooth-borne guide is always going to be the simplest, the easiest to use, and the most accurate. So I'll leave those teeth in place and then go ahead and guide the implants into the sites where these implants are going. And then once those are gone, you've got really two ways that you can go as far as the temporization phase. You can either prep those remaining teeth, okay, and have a bridge ready. Think of maybe shell temps that could go on and just be relined on top of those prepped teeth. And I've done that quite a bit. That's honestly my favorite way to do cases. I'll do immediate load, but it definitely makes me a lot more nervous than if I can do a tooth-borne temp. In an ideal world, you would leave your implants undisturbed to integrate, right? Because it's much lower stakes. It's easy to dial in the temps and to make changes when they're just a tooth-supported roundhouse, especially with printing. And so I would much prefer that and then come back after those implants are fully integrated, and it becomes really easy to expose the implants, place some scan bodies, take a scan, and then you can go ahead and design temps that will only be implant supported to have ready to put in when you extract those teeth. And that could be done in separate appointments, same day, whatever. It's really up to your workflow on that. But this is where the implants are going. So one thing I need to do here, I need to, first of all, it's pretty clear, like that tooth's got to go. That one's already gone. For sure that lateral's got to go. I'm not sure about the uh, the central on this implant. So let's take a look at that. And it does appear that that's going to, definitely be impinging into the central incisor. So I think we'll need to pull that tooth as well. And then let's see if there's any others that are in question. Possibly this canine. Let's look at that. Okay. So it would appear that the canine is going to be okay. So I'm going to leave that, but then definitely pull this one, and then the others can stay. So let's go ahead and make that model, and I'll show you how I would do that. So I'm going to go into uh, where I've got my models. I've already got this exported, so let's just open it up from there. And that's the wrong window, so let me just go ahead and launch a fresh one here. All right, so here's that maxillary model. Now, normally the way I would do this is to just do your virtual extractions. And so, again, I'm remembering it is this first molar here. It's the lateral and central here. It's going to be that one. And then I don't remember after that. So let's see here. Okay, that premolar. All right, so this premolar needs to go. And usually what I'll do is I'll just click on all of those, and I know I'm getting rid of them. Let's just delete a spot because my memory is terrible. I'm going to forget which ones those are if I don't have that as a reference. So having that hole in the mesh is going to really help me to visualize which teeth need to go. Now, as far as how you virtually extract these, of course you could do it and by just using the select tool and just painting this tooth in, but that's slow. No one wants to do that. What I like to do is go to Edit, Generate Face Groups. This again is in Mesh Mixer. And now I can just play with this angle threshold until I get those teeth to be segmented off into their own face group. So let me drop that maybe to 7. And there you see, that's what I was going for. Now these basically can be deleted by just double clicking that, double clicking this, and then that one, and that one. All right, those are my teeth that need to go. You'll always have little isolated pieces of mesh missing. So what I do for that is I'll hold shift and then go greater than, greater than, greater than. And I'm looking around here. I've got just one little isolated spot here. So this will be a good example spot. I've already enlarged the ring 3 times. As I continue to do greater than, all right, now that's a total of 5, and I've swallowed up all those missed triangles. Now I'm just going to shrink it back. But the benefit to doing that is that any of those little isolated triangles that it's already swallowed up, it's not going to open up, again right there. So watch what I mean by that. Shift and less than, less than, less than, less than. And you can see I've got all of those teeth segmented out now. And I'm just simply going to push delete. All right. And now I've got my model here with some holes in the mesh. Okay. So you got a couple options here as well. How are you going to close these sockets up to make them the most accurate? One option might be to just double click the boundary, right? And then hit F, which is erase and fill. I don't generally like to do that. And I'll show you why that is, because once I bow this thing down, now my contact point here is not accurate. So typically what I'll do in this scenario is I will get, my select tool, and I'll maybe go from right here to right there and hit Control B. All right. And now that's, well, actually that did a terrible job. Let's undo that. All right. I'm going to do a new selection because that's bowed way too far in. All right. I want to get about right there and right in here. Control B. There, that's better. And what that does now, if I do it on the other one, and I'll usually do it on the gingival side as opposed to up on the tooth side. Control B. All right. Now I can just take this and double click that opening, F, which is erase and fill, and now I can bow this out to more of a realistic contact. And I'll actually bow this out more than what I really think the tooth is, because I'd rather it have plenty of room for that guide to seat as opposed to having something that's in the way because I left the contact shy there. All right, and then let's go in here and we can make an ovate Ponic site now. So F, and then kind of bow that down. All right. So I'm only going to do that socket this way, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that I've got all of the maxillary teeth. Yes. Okay. So this is another alternative. Now there's an additional step here in that I have taken this CT in its raw DICOM form, took it into DiagnoCat, which is the software I've talked about for bone and tooth segmentation. And usually for a case like this, it's a tooth supported guide, so you typically wouldn't do bone segmentation on that. But here I'm not really after the bone. What I'm actually after is these teeth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and export these teeth and pull them into that same mesh mixer window that I just had. And we'll call this all upper roots. All right. And then briefly before I do really much else, I'll go ahead and just quickly close these in. I'm not going to do them to the same level that I did the first tooth. I really am just trying to close holes. All right. Let's go there to there. And let's go here to here. Okay. And then watch. I'm just going to now do the inspector and just close these holes. So inspector, let's auto repair them all. Repair them all. Okay, so I got this, but obviously I like this socket a lot better than these others. But what I'll do now is I'm going to bring in all of those tooth roots. All right, and now I can select the ones that are exactly where my extraction sockets will be. All right, so those 5 teeth, E, expand to connected, and then I hit Y to separate them off. And now what I could do instead of doing all that model work is I can just directly subtract these teeth from this maxillary model. And that has some additional benefits in that my sockets, I'm not just making up a socket now. It's going to literally be the socket that's left after I do the extractions, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Now, one thing I just know from experience is that when you have a couple of STLs like this that are overlaying one another, if I try to Boolean subtract this, it's probably going to fail. So I'm going to just separate this one off and I'll do that one individually. All right, so Boolean difference. All right, now I have a true to form socket. I'll accept that. Now let's see. Do you see how I got this weird piece of mesh closing that in? I don't exactly want that to happen. So let's see if I can uh, uncheck these and see if that will fix those issues. Okay, so that took care of that. Now I don't have those meshes crossing over one another. Now the rest of these, since they're all kind of individual and not touching one another, these I can just subtract as a whole. So select the maxillary model, select those remaining 4 roots, Boolean difference. Okay, so no worries, we got a failure here. Anytime it turns red like that, that means it doesn't like something you did. And so we're going to go in and have to figure that out. So anytime you have Boolean functions where they fail, then the model's going to be red, but what you really need to look for is these little blue marks. They'll either be a blue or a red mark or a little line extending to somewhere. And that's going to draw your attention to the trouble areas of why this thing is failing. Okay, so I'm making a mental note right here of that spot on the mesial buccal of number, what is that, 7, and then same on number 12. Okay, so let's cancel. And now let's just go in and try to see what the culprit is. All right, Now, it won't necessarily always be readily apparent. Um, I'm gonna just here. What I'll do is I'm gonna just delete the top of this so that you can see internally and kind of appreciate what's going on there. All right, so it's this corner. Let's zoom in on that corner, and now you start to see what the culprit is. That little piece right there, basically, if you look at the wireframe, the meshes are dissimilar. Plus, it's just this ultra tiny little spot, and the software is confused. It's just not able to make sense of what to do with that. All right, let's look at the other one. The other one was tooth number 7, and that was right up here. So now that one, it's not as apparent to me what the culprit is, but nonetheless, well, actually, yes, I do know. It's this little point. You're probably subdividing those tiny, tiny little triangles right there to the point where the software can't remesh it. All right, so let's undo that from earlier where I lost the top of my model. All right, so now I've got that. Now, how would I deal with this? The way I would deal with it is I would go in and maybe using a sculpting tool, robust smooth, for example, and now it's also apparent on this side what's wrong. You see that little piece of the mesh that's turned inside out? So all I'm going to do is just touch this. That's literally one touch, two touches, three touches with the robust smooth tool. And I'm going to come on over here and do the exact same on this tooth. All right. So I'm just going to touch, touch, touch. Now also, I don't like that it has that hole kind of going internally there. So I'm just going to delete that. All right. I'm going to go in and just maybe select that, select that, select that. I'll just delete them. And now you see those bits of mesh that are floating internally. I'll just now select the model. Oops, something's still connected here. Let's see where the culprit is. Because when I select it all on that model, it shouldn't include this. And that's why. Do you see this little extension? Undo that. That is the culprit. Okay. So let's just select this now. And I can break that connection. I'll just expand my ring a few times. So expand, 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 expand. Eventually it's there. You see it poked through. Now I'm deleting it. Okay. And let's make sure that this isn't also doing the same thing. And it is, so exact same. I'm going to go greater than, greater than, greater than, until hopefully I detach that from whatever it is that is connecting it. I think that did it. Yeah, so now you see those are just floating bits. Invert and delete. Fix your holes. And now I should be able to extract these teeth without having a failure of the mesh. All right, edit, Boolean difference, and there you have it. Okay. Run your analysis inspector and make sure you don't have any holes. Have a couple there. Now let me point one thing out. So obviously this would need to be the model that I make the implant guide on. One of the things I know is going to be a problem though is that if I've gone ahead and extracted these teeth in this manner, now my surgical guide is going to try to drop into all of those spots, which I don't want. But I do want this model for assessing the implant positions, for evaluating where my temps are contoured relative to the socket. So I usually just will duplicate this and make an extra model that doesn't have those full sockets. So here I've duplicated. And since this is all just one face group here, right? We'll detach it from that little spot. And then I'm going to just do the same thing on the others. All right, just made those into their own face group so that now I can just click in each of them. G, that's just my socket boundaries. And now I'm going to hit F for erase and fill, because I can have a little bit of an obate ponic site, but I don't want it to be, huge where it's dropping that far down in there. So I might do just something like that. This would be the model I build the surgical guide on. Okay, this model would be the one that I would do everything else on. And actually, when I print the models for the doctor to try in, like this is the one I would use. I'll usually go a step further and subtract out the implants from this. That might be worth showing. So here we're back in this case again. If I was to export these implants, file, export data, let's export all of these implants and abutments. Again, you don't have to do every step of this as I'm doing it, but as a lab sending this out to doctors, I want it to look really, really nice. So I do it. It's just up to you if you want to. All right. So there's implant sites. So here, obviously, the implants are going to protrude through. What's an easy way we could deal with that? Well, we could just select this top and then hit D for extrude and just raise this thing up till at least it's over that. Okay, that's an easy fix. Now, if we were to just try and do the Boolean subtraction of these things, again, I'll just tell you from experience, it's going to fail. It's probably going to fail even after I do this, but that's for a different reason. But the reason why it will fail just as is exported from Blue Sky is because of the configuration of this mesh. You see how different that mesh is compared to just this? Those do not subtract well from one another. And so rather what I do usually is go ahead and make my implant solid. Okay, so let's just hit edit, make solid. And now I'm getting all these holes. Why is that? Well, let me show you this in two stages. Let's just separate those off for a second. It's getting those holes because it sees all this internal surface inside the implant, which I really don't need. I'm really just trying to get one big solid object that I can subtract. So again, generate face groups, and if you want to get rid of all that internal aspect, just let's select that. Okay, G, and then delete it. Now this external mesh is going to be separated from the internal. E. E is expanded connected. Now you see how that leaves that connection out. So let's invert and delete all those. Now then also we should run an inspector, fix this. Okay, great. And just because I want to make sure that the abutments and the implants fully connect, and if I had to guess, I would say that implant, there might even be a few micron space underneath it. Let's just extend this up a little bit, like maybe 3/10 of a millimeter even. So I'm going to hit D for extrude, 0.3. All right. Now I know that those implants and abutments are going to connect, and I can join it back together. So what I'll do now is hit make solid. Now I'm not going to get any of those little holes internally, and it's really up to you. How accurate do you want this to be? I could change to accurate and maybe increase the mesh density if I wanted this to look a little cleaner. Okay. And now that is my implants all made solid. If I wanted to extract those from this model as well. And let's go ahead and try to do that Boolean extraction. Or Boolean difference. It's gonna fail. I will almost guarantee you, because I'm looking at that and it's not gonna like that. So just to prove my point, let's go do it, because I want to see the other culprit areas where that's going to be a problem. All right, exactly where I was pointing to. Okay, the very bottom rung of that is going to cause a failure. Are there any others? Yes. Internal in here. Inside of this socket, right? So once again, how would I deal with it? Let's just cancel that first of all. Here, I'd probably just deal with this by just, it was such a small spot that I'd just grab my smooth tool, right? And I just hit the shrink smooth tool on that. All right, that one's going to be no issue now. And then the other one was this guy. And this is a little trick I'll sometimes do. If you just keep on zooming, eventually you get internal to this model, okay? And I know it's where these two are going to butt together that's going to be the culprit area. So maybe I just briefly touch it with the smooth tool. Ooh, that's even better. Looking internal, you can really see like that tiny little subdivided triangle. Get rid of that. Now, I would bet that this will work. Boolean difference. And there we have it. You know what? I want to jump in and check really quick. Okay, I got a little worried there that I didn't have the right microphone designated. I don't want to do like last week where I spoke for 20 minutes to a blank microphone that wasn't picking anything up. All right, analysis inspector. So I really like having this model, uh, for doing mock surgery on. There's a lot of purposes of what this model will give you. Plus, just kind of cool if you're documenting your cases. So let's think now. We would take the previous model that we've made here. That's what we build the guide on. Pull it back into Blue Sky, make your surgical guide. Okay, and that would be here. You can see where I've previously done this. I've got a model that I called make guide on this. All right, so now let's do the drill guide. There's our drill guide. Now, one thing you will often run into with these FP1 restorations or with immediate implants, and I'll show you this in cross section, is that oftentimes you're placing deep. And if you're using at least the Blue Sky Bio fully guided kit, remember the default offset is 8.5. Okay, so let's look at what that would do. So now look at where that tube is. It's buried up under the tissue. Not going to be able to do it. Okay, so what I do for that is I will compensate by changing the offset. So this is a 5x13 implant. And that would mean you'd use the 13 millimeter drill. Now the good news is I've got a drill longer than that. There's now 16 millimeter drills in the Blue Sky fully guided kit. So what if I move this tube up 3 millimeters, and then that's going to still put my drill tip right here, but I'll have to do that by using the 16 millimeter drill as opposed to the 13, which matches the implant. Okay, so that's all I did here. It's 8.5 there. I just changed this to 11.5. That raises it 3 millimeters. Okay, now it's up and out of the tissue, and I just have to make myself a note when I'm doing the surgery. Hey, even though this is a 13 implant, you're going to go to the 16 drill, and part of the way that I remind myself to do that is that I'll use the text emboss tool to say, hey, this one, the tube's been raised 3 millimeters. So if this is a 13, you need to use the 16 drill. And I basically had to do that on all of these implants except for the two sites where there's already missing teeth. Those I got away without it, but the others here I've raised it 1.5. Here I've raised it 3, here 1.5. So that's a little tip to take home with you if you're going to do a tooth-borne case, into extraction sockets. All right, so we've got that. Now let's go back into Mesh Mixer. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, let's export the wax up. Okay, those are temps that already have the preps in them. And so really what I need to show you is how do I generate this from these, just your raw wax up teeth. Okay, that's what we need to do here. So I'm going to just export these teeth, file, export data, get rid of everything except for the teeth. And I'm going to call these initial wax up teeth. And most of this remaining work I'm going to do in Mesh Mixer. Okay. So what's going to have to happen is, first of all, I've got to turn these just raw teeth that I've got right now into a roundhouse bridge. Okay. Exported a tube by accident here as well. And then furthermore, I've got to somehow fit this over these remaining teeth, assuming that they're going to get prepped. But if we're going to make shell temps, then those have got to be able to drop in over these teeth. So how would I prep these teeth right here? All right, so let's do that. So first of all, I'm going to go to Edit, Generate Face Groups, kind of do a new version of that. And it looks like those two back molars are not going to cooperate, which is fine. We'll just do those two by hand. So as I'm doing this here, I'm just looking for the areas where there's no color transition, versus right here, you can still see that that's got a pretty good color transition. Okay, there's a little connection. So if I now hit Control G, I've made a face group of that, and now it's easy to just select the remainder of it. Okay. Once again, if I'm not wanting to color in all these, just expand the ring a couple times and then pull it right back. All right, that's now its own group. Now I'm going to come over here to this one. So I'd love to be able to just click this individual tooth, but when I do that, it's got all these areas of connection to this one, so I just need to break those connections. That's a pretty big area of connection. All right. And I could hit Control G here, but now because I've broken that, they're still the same color, but now this is its own face group. Okay, and same deal. Expand the ring. There we go. And I'm just going to proceed around the arch, selecting all of these teeth. Actually, you know what? I probably first need to do these right here. So for starters, expand the ring about 4 times and then pull it back. And then I'll just have to do a little bit of this by hand where I just paint it in. missed that one. I'm going to come in here and draw right across that. Got a couple little missed spots like that. Let's just expand ring one more time and then pull back. And then I like to smooth the boundary just to make it a clean transition. Okay, so now we've got all of these teeth kind of separated. So here's what I like to do is I'll just select all these teeth now, and then I'm going to hit Y. Okay, so these are now their own independent shells. All right, and how could I now apply a prep to this? Well, I could take this tooth, for example, and what if I offset it, but not outward? What if I went, say, negative 0.6? Okay, surely dentists won't be so conservative that they can't prep, zero point 0.6 off the tooth. All right, and basically what that just did is that gave me a prep pretty much. All right, so I'm going to do that on all of these teeth real quick. I can do them all at the same time. Well, why does that want to select with this one? Let's delete that. There we go. And I can anticipate this is going to be problematic, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. So now those are independent from one another. E, expand to all, or expand to connected, I'm sorry. Offset, and again, let's offset it by negative 0.6. And these are simulating the preps that we'll do. Alrighty. So what I will do here, select this one, and now I can just invert and get rid of all those original teeth. Okay, now you've done a really nice prep on all your teeth. I'll also flip this inside out, flip normals. I can smooth the boundaries of all of them at once. And then inevitably you're going to have some that, just end up with a rough boundary. So I'd just say get you a shrink tool and just kind of give it a once over in those roughened spots. And the reason why I'm doing this is because here in a moment, you remember when we first basically separated these from the model, that left a big hole where those teeth were in the mesh. And what I'm going to end up doing is bringing these back in and joining the boundary of that hole that was left to this. And so I need this to be somewhat smooth. Now, an obvious other alternative that you could have done here is you could have just printed this model and prepped the teeth, but that sucks. Who wants to do that? I'd rather sit here and do it digitally in my underwear at night. But it's really whatever you prefer. There's not a right or a wrong. Okay. All right. And then, if you wanted to, you could also, if you're really anal, you could just smooth all of these. You don't want to overdo it because then you start losing some of the contour, but you're still going to end up maintaining about that 0.6 of reduction. Look it over if there's any just, blatantly obvious, undercut areas or uh, sharp spots, things like that. You could go ahead and deal with them now. But if you remember here, this was that original model. So let's combine these back together. Combine. Okay. And now I can just start the process of joining this back together. Just let me see exactly where those edge triangles are, and then I hit J to join. Now that's your exact same original model, but now it's got a beautiful 0.6 prep on every single tooth. And I'm just going to repeat. So the goal here is not like to make this to be identical to your preps, because you haven't even done your preps. You don't know exactly what your preps are going to be like. The idea is just to put a bare minimum prep on it, which we can then subtract from those teeth to essentially make shell temps. And then you would know that you're going to prep more than that, but once you get it in the mouth, now you can do a quick reline with acrylic or whatever and get these fitting really well, but have the benefit of those temps already being made, of already being polished and really nicely contoured and all that stuff. I don't enjoy doing that chair side. So if I can do this, I just saw a boo-boo there. Let's cancel that. Here I've got two independent shells for the teeth, but the hole is just one big hole. Okay, so I got to think how I want to handle that. And my inclination is just to probably join these two teeth together so that you've got, not three meshes, but now you just got two. So I think I'll do that, but I'm also going to have to break this little thing right there. And then get rid of those little floating bits. So again, before I can do this, I can't select this border and that and join properly, because then what about this one? It's just going to pull like this. Let's instead go and first of all join these two teeth together. I don't like that little spot. Okay. So I'll just do that and hit Control B. That's your bridge. And now I should be able to join these things up. Now that in doing so, you know, you're going to have to pick up a little bit of this with your acrylic reline, uh, unless you want to get, really psycho about it. Like, since I've got this already selected here, what if I just pulled this down like so? And then I'd need to go touch that up and smooth it a bit. But that would probably make for a more realistic scenario right there. So now I'll just click this edge and this edge, J. All right, cool. Now I've got a really nice prep model where every tooth here has an exact 0.6 of prep on it. Okay. And just to make this not look so busy, I'm going to just make that now a single face group. Okay, so what if we turn on our teeth now? Not the actual teeth, but rather the patient's wax-up teeth. Okay, so I didn't have this model when I did the initial setup, and so now I can recontour these a little bit so that they're going to fully cover over this. I don't mind so much if a temp is going to be bulky at the margins. That's easy to trim back, but I don't want thin. Thin's going to be a problem. So what I'm going to do right now is just take this with my inflate tool. Okay, let's see, get the right spot size, about like this. And then anywhere that I see these shy areas, I'm just going to bump up the thickness on them. It's not an exact science. I'm really ballparking it. The other thing I find with FP1 temps, they tend to break pretty easily because, again, this is thin material. Okay. Now it's a different story if you actually scan, let's say, a prepped arch and then make it, because now you're preserving bulk of material. You're not, doing multiple layers and relines and that kind of stuff. But here, if these are trying to be made ahead of time where you're going to end up picking them up, I find it beneficial to go ahead and just overbulk the connectors between them. Same down here. I'll bulk that up. Definitely need to bulk this tooth up quite a bit. And same in there. Now you might wonder, am I changing the occlusion here? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be an isolated area or two that I might end up affecting the occlusion, but I don't really worry about that at this stage because I can at any point pull in that patient's original lower arch and then just Boolean subtract it back from this, and then I'm back to, dialed in occlusion. Okay. Now I'm not going to spend the time to do this all perfectly. I just really want to cover all my margins. Again, bulking up connectors for strength so that hopefully these things don't break during the temp phase. Now, the nice thing I will say about printing, or if you've got a mill in-house like we do, is that it's not the end of the world because you can just simply mill a new set. But no one wants to deal with that, right? It's just additional work if it happens. So I'm going to do what I can to try and avoid that if possible. All right, I think this will be the last one that I've got to mess with, and then we can start making these temps. There we go. So notice I've really not altered the contours of my temps that much. There might be some areas that I need to smooth out like that. And I'll just touch that with the smooth tool real briefly. And anywhere else that I see weird contours. But that overall looks pretty good. Okay. Oh, now this looks bulky right there too. So I just want to smooth that in. Oh, and I've got one last spot here that I need to inflate that I just missed. Okay. Now, as you're inflating, remember, if you just barely inflate enough that it just disappears, then you're going to have a paper thin thickness right there, right? So once you see that color disappear and you know you've covered it, keep going just a little bit more so that you know you're going to, at least I would say you want a minimum of 0.3 or 4 thickness there for printing or milling, preferably more, but that would do it. Okay, so now we've got this, and what I'm going to do now, I've obviously changed the contour of these by quite a bit, right? And right now these are all individual face groups, as you see here. So my first step is going to be, before I try to Boolean subtract this prep model, is to make these solid. So edit, make solid, watch the quality deteriorate. I don't want that, so I'm going to change to accurate and turn up the mesh density and the solid accuracy. All right, so now this is just a roundhouse chain of teeth. And what we could do now is Boolean subtract this prep model. Now, chances are this will fail initially, and if it does, once again, I think that's valuable learning to see how to deal with it when stuff does fail. But I don't want to lose this model, so I'm going to just duplicate it. It would not be a bad idea to save this case as well, just so that if something crashes, I'm not dead in the water here. So I'm just going to call this project. There we go. Okay, so let's just give this a try. Meshes are fairly similar. So what I'm going to do is select the temps, and then this model, Boolean difference. Okay, as I expected, there's a couple little culprit areas. So making some mental notes of where those are. Number 2, 4, 5 contact, 11, 12 areas. All right, so I'll cancel that. Probably the easiest way I could see these is, I can delete the top of this model without any problems, because that's actually pretty far away from anything that's, being Boolean subtracted, so I'm not too worried about that aspect. And let's again look at those culprit areas. All right, right there is one. How could I deal with that? I could just touch it with a smooth tool very briefly. Okay. Okay, this was the other area, and I see why that is, because it's such a little tiny isthmus of material there to subtract from. The other area was this 11, 12 region. All right, see the triangles that are getting subdivided there? Let's just try to make that a continuous area. I think that was it. So let's try it again. If not, then we'll see where the new spots are. Still got 2 to go. So let's fix those. This is between contact 1213 and right here. Just going to zoom in and look at that. Okay, once again, this is what will drive you crazy when you're learning Mesh Mixer is just, everything is great when it works, but when it doesn't work, like how do you deal with it? That's what seems to drive people crazy. Okay, again, back to 1213 contact. There we go. I bet this will work now. Let's see. And there we go. All right. Now, it really depends on how much you want to geek out on doing this. First of all, let's fill any holes. But if you noticed on my original temps, I mean, I've taken the time to go the extra mile and make those where they are perfectly contoured, ideal ovate Ponic sites, right? I mean, look at that compared to the maxilla after I've done extractions. Okay, I mean those pontics are contoured perfectly to that. Probably see it easier if I turn the transparency up. So for example, note the Ponic site going into that socket, right? Now, you could do that by many ways. You could do that via uh, just adding flowable composite, right? I'm just going to do maybe a couple little isolated ones here, and then, you know, up to you how you want to approach that from that point forward. But let's pull open that extraction model again. Okay, so I'm going to make a duplicate of it and kind of show you how I might contour temps. I can just cut all this crap off because it's not really relevant, and that lets me look internally here. And then I could now see where I need to extend the temps up to. Okay, so for example, right in here, I could grab a inflate tool and just inflate this up into this socket a bit. Okay, what about here? Inflate that into that socket a bit. I'm seeing there I'm deficient in that socket, so I might choose to bulk this up some from the facial to close some of that socket gap. And then make it more ovate. Okay, so you get the idea of what I'm trying to do there. Uh, Also, you're going to have some just rough areas. You can hit those with a smoothing tool. Really up to you how you want to approach that. You could smooth it back with flowable composite. There's a lot of options of how you could approach that. That just kind of melts it away. Something like that, you're going to want to cut that off, I think. So I'll just come in, lasso that, F, okay, and then I can smooth it. All right, so you get the idea. I'm not going to spend the time to do that. Now, the one thing I will mention, let's say I smoothed up all my Ponic sides and that's clean and ready to go now. Don't expect to be able to print this model and then print these temps and it just drops on beautifully. Like realistically, that's not going to happen because we did a dead zero subtraction, right? We did 0.6 off these teeth and then just subtracted that. So if I print this model, it's just not going to go in passively. So a few ways to deal with that. And then one other thing I'll mention, I never did a path of draw on this. Like I didn't ensure that this all has a path of draw. In fact, just doing that 0.06 subtraction, I mean, this clearly doesn't draw. This tooth is wider at the top than it is at the bottom. Because usually what I'm going to do is after I prep this model, I will go in with a diamond and just smooth these up briefly. If you were really geeking out, you could actually take this model into Blue Sky Plan, do a path of draw, and that would block out all undercuts, and then you could subtract the undercut model from your temps, and then you know it's all going to seat. But then I find they get excessively bulky. It's extra work. I don't find it to be difficult to, first of all, prep these teeth into parallel just very briefly with a lab handpiece, maybe knock the corners off, and then on the temps themselves, I'll come in here, and again, knowing that this tooth is wider down here at the incisal than here, I'm just going to lay a burr inside of here and open that a bit, and I'll just probably do that against all of these contact points where I've got extra bulk of material. And right here's another good example, right? Take that burr, lay it in this way, and you'd be reducing this out a bit. I mean, at some point, you got to ask yourself, is it worth the trouble to do all that digitally? For me, it's not. I would just do that by hand with a lab handpiece or a high speed, whatever your preference is. Okay, so this is a scenario where we've got now temps for a case where you're going to strategically keep the teeth, and these would be tooth-borne temps. Now, I always recommend to docs when they do these cases, it's wise that you've placed your implants right, go ahead and throw on some scan bodies. And I suggest to them, before you even remove the other teeth, because those are going to be valuable stitching points, get me an intraoral scan with scan bodies on the implants. All right. And that way I can pull that in. I could always virtually extract those teeth once I've stitched it in. But now if something breaks, I could actually make implant-borne temps. Now, not so important here, but where it would be important is second stage. So imagine we're 4 months down the line, implants we assume have integrated. You don't want to have to get them back necessarily and do just an uncovery appointment and then scans that day. What I would prefer is to actually just do one uncovery and deliver the temps which have already been made. So if at the time of surgery I get that scan of the implant positions, that's not going to change between day of surgery and when they're integrated. So I could have those temps already made for them. But then the other thing I'll do is I ask the doctors, take that scan, then you can take the scan bodies off and forget about them. But now prep the teeth, okay? And once you've prepped the teeth, get me a scan of that as well. Because in that scenario, now I can make direct to the tooth temporaries that don't have to be relined. They'll have the perfect amount of cement spacer. They'll be far, far stronger. I can mill those in PMMA, print them, whatever, but they're going to hold up much better. Now, hopefully you never need that, but if you were to end up breaking some temps, what I usually do is, if the doctor wants, is I'll roll into the case fee me redesigning the temps based on their actual prep model. And then if they have printers or mills, they usually want that file, and they can go ahead, if the patient calls up and says, hey, I've broken my temps, you can just print them or mill them new ones now direct to your prep, and they're going to hold up much better. Patient walks in the door, you undo them, you pop the new ones in, they fit beautifully. It's a lot less work. So take that for what it's worth. You don't have to do that, but I think that's a wise use of your time. You're just adding two little scans, so it can really save you a lot of stomach lining down the line. All right, so that's this case. The other case I had pulled up about FP1 temps was this one, and it's a similar case. We've got, let's see, 6 maxillary implants going in. Turn on the abutments so we can see them. So similar scenario. This is a great case to do this on because you're already missing a bunch of the teeth where implants need to go. It just makes it so easy. What I would do though is strategically extract this tooth, and that tooth, and that's all that's got to come out. But in this case, the doctor did not want to do a tooth-borne temp. He was concerned about, the cantilevering effect back here. He just wants to go implant-supported FP1 temps. So again, if I would do my virtual extractions all the same way, but I would first of all make a model with only that tooth, and that tooth removed, and we're still going to use a tooth-borne guide that will seat on these teeth that remain, right? That's going to be the most accurate way to get your implants positioned and in place. Then after they're in, go ahead and extract all the teeth, okay? Once again, I think it's good practice to, maybe even before you extract the teeth, put some scan bodies on and scan your implant positions. That way, if something ever breaks down the line, you can already make direct to implant temps that you don't have to do a pickup on. It's up to you. But once I've done the implant surgery, now I need a model with all of the teeth extracted. Okay, so here you can see I have that. And actually on this one, I was just being fancy because I had the segmentations done. I've made a maxilla with the tissue superimposed on it, but with realistic sockets by extracting those teeth. You don't have to do that. That's just showing off basically. But now you can see where those implants are going to be, and I need to do the same thing. I'm going to contour temps so that they fit down into those sockets and everything. Let's turn the transparency on this model where you can see it. All right. So notice here, like this socket, how my temp is going to extend up into that. So it's going to develop perfect ovate ponic forms. Okay. Now, I tell the doctor when they're doing this, I'll say, listen, you need to go ahead and flap, right? You don't have to lay a huge flap, but you do need to flap because these temps are just never going to seat otherwise, especially in these sites. So my suggestion would be to lay a flap, basically lingually placed kind of right here, and then coming around the lingual aspect of all the teeth, and then reflect that. And you don't have to go deep with it, but at least reflect it off the occlusal aspect of the ridge, because again, if you look at these temps, the way they're contoured, you're just never going to get those seated if that tissue is in the way. These are going into the tissue. And then with that reflected, now your temps will seat. You can pick up your implants. Don't suture yet. All right, go ahead and pick up your implants, and then you could cut the palatal index off and then deliver your temps and permanently screw them in. Now just suture the tissue up loosely to these. The idea here is, again, like that full arch healing abutment concept that myself and Danny Doming published a while back. We want to use these temps almost like a full arch healing abutment. The tissue is going to take the form of whatever you give it to shape around, right? Think about a single tooth healing abutment. It's going to take the shape of that healing abutment. Here, what I'm after is I want my tissue to take the form of these ovate pontics, okay, so that it really looks like these teeth are emerging out of the tissue like a natural tooth. It's always a dead giveaway on an FP1 is if you've done no tissue contouring and it's just ridge lapped everywhere, those look like garbage. They don't look good. We want those things to be looking like they're emerging directly out of the tissue. Okay, so that's how I do that. And then the only difference here of how I've approached this is instead of making this where there's a prep on the tooth, right? The teeth are gone. So all I do is I export my implant abutments, and you could also even apply a path of draw so that it'll seat over them all at once. But then I'm subtracting that from my temps. Okay. Now let me tell you what. Let me just export these models because I know someone had asked me about how to make this little palatal jig. And the reason for that, you can imagine if, let's turn on just the maxilla. All right. There, now you can really see how contoured to the bone these are. How do you seat these to the right position? Okay, that's the issue. If you've now, you're not connected to the implants, you're about to pick this up. So how do you seat this to the proper position without seating it too far or not seating it enough, how do you be precise with that? Well, for me, the answer is just make a palatal index. So I'll show you how to make that real quick, and then we'll wrap it up for today. All right, let's export these models. Don't need the implants. And we're going to put this here. So I'm just opening a new window here. There we go. And then I need to separate these files out real briefly. I'm also, while I'm at it, going to go ahead and generate face groups, and I'm just going to delete my palatal index and show you how I would make it from scratch. So I'll select all this, G, delete, and then fill in those holes. All right, so basically here all I have is regular old temps. I've got the holes, but they're just going to be floating in air if you try to deliver this with the flap raised. Okay, so how would I make the palatal index for this? The way I'm going to do it is by using my select tool, and I'm going to go up here and just basically outline where I want that palatal index to be. And the more palatal coverage you can get, the better it is. Okay, something like that. I'm going to smooth my boundary, and then I'm going to go ahead and offset this. And you're basically only looking for maybe a 0.2 offset, really minimal. All right, now do you see how that's floating up off this maxillary model, up off the palatal tissue by about 0.2? Hit Y, separate that into its own STL, and now what I'm going to do is select it again and offset it again. And this time, how much thickness do I want? I'm going to say let's make this 2 millimeters thick. Okay, so now it's up off there by 2 millimeters. And while I'm at it, I'm going to smooth this. All right. And then I'm going to briefly go around and just smooth up the edges of this. Now, one thing you'll run into, like if I go in and I'm trying to smooth this, do you see how I'm accidentally affecting the one underneath it? That one I need to remain unchanged so that it, keeps my tissue fit proper. So I'm going to select this one, and first of all, flip it inside out. But secondly, I'm going to just temporarily separate it into its own group. Okay? So it's there, and I can get it back very easily, but now I can use my sculpting tools on that upper surface without having to worry about altering that. All right, and now I'll just smooth this out. Much easier to do, not having to worry about affecting that surface underneath. All right, there we go. And now just connect it back to this one. Combine, but right now they're two independent meshes. What I'm going to do is select the boundary and select this boundary. O, B to smooth, and then J. We'll accept that. So that is the palatal index, and now I just need to combine it with this, my temps, and that's going to be what holds the temps in the proper position during the pickup. And of course, once you've picked up your implants and your acrylic or material is set, the idea is that this thing is just going to be cut off. So you want it to be easily removed. Probably the easiest way to accomplish that is just to add a tube. Okay, so I can now extend this tube from maybe here. Notice how it's wanting to go internal. That's because I've got it set to spline inside. I need to go spline outside. And now that's better. Okay, and then grab the other end and position it wherever you want to put it here. You can increase the tangent length, so if you're trying to bow that thing up where it's not going to run into the guide itself, then you can do that. Put it wherever you want, and you can change the radius if you want. Let's say, well, 1.5, that's about what I would want. So that means a 3mm connection here that'll be easily cut off. And now I'm just going to add a couple of more. Okay. And notice I'm adding these on surfaces where it's going to be easy to adjust them. I wouldn't want to do this to an occlusal surface because good luck ever carving back in with a handpiece, that kind of anatomy. You want to do it on probably a good flat surface that's going to be easy to just cut the connections, smooth it up, and it won't really affect the fit and function and all that. Add another tube. We're going to go right there and then right here and add one more. And there you have it. Okay. And there's all kinds of variations of this design, but I'm just trying to teach the concept here. This now becomes a palatal seating index. Worth mentioning too that I mentioned that when you make that palatal incision, basically the incision should go just lingual to your implants. So if this is the palatal tissue, my incision would probably go like here. And then I don't do any palatal reflection. All the reflection happens out towards the buccal to expose this bone. But I don't want this tissue affected, and that's going to leave it in position where now when I'm doing this pickup, one, it sucks to have a palatal flap raised. If you've ever had your palate flapped, I'm sure remembered it. But now that tissue is going to be left in place. It will support this, index it into position, do your pickup, and then as soon as the pickup's done, you can come in, section those little connectors, and you've got some beautiful FP1 temps. And again, I've stressed it a bunch, but I think it's very wise before you start doing too much that you go ahead and either get a scan of the teeth after they're prepped, if you're doing this on teeth, or of scan bodies with the implant. Okay, I know this is stressful. It's easy to miss steps like that, but I promise you it can really save you a ton of headache down the road if you end up having something break, and you'll be wishing you had done that. So anyway, I think that's about it for today. Probably had all the mesh mixer you can take for today. So hope you found that helpful, and I'll see you next week. All right, how do I end this thing?